So now we're going to continue looking at the respiratory system. This time we're going to look at the respiratory alveoli, the bronchioles, and the basement membrane, or the respiratory membrane. So these are some of the things that we're going to look at in this video. We'll definitely look at the difference between these two. We'll review this, and then we'll also talk about the respiratory membrane. Now, this is going to sound very similar to my previous video, but it's going to actually go into a little more detail. So, brought to you by Curious Moranland. All right, so first thing, let's remember what's going on here. We're following air going in here. So, in my previous video, I talked about from trachea down to alveoli. So this is like the follow-up to that. So I'm not going to talk about this or the cartilage plates. So we're following the air. Ultimately, we're going to get into an individual alveolus. This cluster that's called alveoli. That's the singular, the plural. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do is going to put this picture up a couple times. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk our way through here. Well, then we're going to zoom in. So as we go, I guess in this case you can say superior to inferior, or superficial to deep. Then we're going to end up looking into here, actually into an individual alveolus. This is alveoli, and then we'll look at the perfusion and then the return of the oxygenated blood. Okay, and then we'll zoom in further. So if you were to actually do a cross section here, do a cut here, I should probably say, you know, this. If you're looking at this and do say, I guess a frontal, well, that's what you would get here. So we definitely want to identify all of these structures here. Okay, and then we'll come back to this. So let's start back with the slides from my previous video. Oh, yes, we'll definitely zoom in here. So that's kind of the preview. Now let's actually talk about it. In my previous video, this is the same slide where I went through, I numbered kind of like the pathway of the structures going from trachea to all the way down to the alveolus. Now let's lace this alveolus with capillaries. In this case, what we'll call pulmonary capillaries. And then we'll zoom back in. So this quick reminder, in the previous video we talked about the major functions. We're really going to be only talking about these two functions, the large surface area and the passageway of air, and how those two connect to allow for the function of gas exchange. Quick reminder. All right, so like I said, we're focusing on these two in these videos. All right, now remember, when you're studying this huge tract, remember, this is a mucous membrane. It's open to the outside. When you're looking at this tract, you have the conduction part, which is getting the air, and then to the certain areas where the respiratory portion is going to actually have the gas exchange. So let's look at this again, and let's start with this. Okay, all right, first, when we talk about bronchioles, what exactly is a bronchiole? All right, that is a tube that here's the basic parts of diameter. If you're one of my students, I would pause the video and just take a quick little note about these videos. All right, so we're talking about respiratory bronchioles, terminal bronchioles. Well, what's the difference between the two? In my previous video, we mentioned that the respiratory bronchiole will have alveoli attached to it. Terminal is just that continuous tube, you can connect it all the way to here. And then once you get to the smaller bronchi, the bronchiole, so bronchi is bigger, right? And then you have the terminal ones, and then once you have alveoli attached to it, it's called a respiratory bronchiole. That's the main difference between these two. So let's quick little note about alveolar sacs. All right, I mean, each lung has 150 million alveoli. That's a lot because of what it needs to do. All right, and this large branch and this extensive passageway is the whole idea. Increasing the surface area is going to increase the function and allows for this, your gas exchange through diffusion. And then why? Because you got to get oxygen. You got to get oxygen to your cells that are going to break down glucose or go through the citric acid cycle and recycle that process and generate a whole bunch of ATP. But let's talk about that later. Okay. So first thing it is, and numbered, the respiratory epithelium. Think about it like this. Air, this is the passageway of air. So there's your air. I'll just write A for air. Okay, I'll spell it out. Okay. So there's air. What's coming through here? This is blood. And where is the pulmonary artery coming from? It's coming from let's do that properly. The right ventricle. Think about it. The pulmonary branch, okay, so from the right ventricle, it's deoxygenated blood. So this is all deoxygenated blood, and it's perfused. And there's these vessels that are perfusion. Remember, perfusion. They're perfusing in here. This is supplying it for the tissue here. That's different than providing the blood. It's coming all the way down into here, and as you'll see the gas exchange. So follow the blood into this whole area. Now this whole section is referred to as a pulmonary lobe. That is a functional unit of all the cluster of alveolar sacs, and we call it a pulmonary lobe. Okay, so again, this is supposed to be RV for right ventricle. If you want to, let's go through and do some more numbering, and then we'll talk more. All right, so let me do this again. All right, I didn't like how I wrote that. So this is from, and I'm trying to spell with the mouse here, the right ventricle. Blood. So I'm not going to, blood coming from the right ventricle. Blood coming from the right ventricle. In conjunction, it's going to interact with the air. So let's see if I can draw this. The air, like for example, here's the air. Follow the pathway of the air into these sections. So I'm just going to write again A for air in this case. A for air. All right. And if you want to be technical, this blood that has picked up the oxygen, that's going to be here. This pulmonary branch. This is going back to the left atrium. Okay. So this would be, and this so blood. This has the O2. This doesn't. This actually is going to be dropping off. Let's say, what is this dropping off? CO2, and this is taking back O2. All right. So let's look at this. Looking at my video, I want to cut this off and not do too much. So let's get to just a quick zoom in. All right. Notice, so the respiratory bronchiole is right here. The alveolar duct. And then, if you look what I'm going to show next, notice the numbering's out of place. Here is the alveolar sac that's made up of the individual alveolus. So that's why I numbered that 4. Okay. And again, this would be the air. This is the air that's going through, and this would be the blood, and then this is the returning blood with the O2. So deoxygenated blood or carbon dioxide laced blood, and then so the gas exchange. So let's zoom back in here. What's happened? So here's, if we were to cut this section open and we would see and zoom in, see all these membranes, and see there's stuff that's actually connecting. So let's see here. So here's some interesting things, some structures that I expect my students to know. That these cells, the surfactant. So, all right, I'm going to come back to that in a second. I just need to change one slide. A couple things I wanted to mention was, when we go back to that slide, is what is the purpose of some of those cells here? All right. So this surfactant, all right, this is what allows or keeps the alveoli open, those passageways open. So it secretes a substance called surfactant. So I went ahead and put this slide in here. So you got the alveolar macrophages, and here's the surfactant, and this is one of the things that's going to help keep the alveoli open. It reduces the surface tension. The special cell is called a nematocyte. If you think about pneumonia, a nematocyte. There's two nematocytes. Type 2 is the septal cell, and then type 1 is the simple squamous cell. Now it's not labeled on here, but so let's look at. So you got, this is the type 2. This is type 1. This is type 2 over here. Now there's some elastic fibers, all right, and this is this macrophage, as you see over here. This is an immune cell. This is an immune cell that's going to help get rid of debris and also fight off bacterial infection or viral or even microscopic animals. So, and you notice these things can ooze in here. They can get in quickly, have access to here, the capillary. There's the bloodstream. Okay, so let's just kind of look at the last thing here is this thing called the respiratory membrane. These alveoli, so here's squamous cell alveoli. Here's squamous cell epithelium. Again, that's type 1, and this is type 2. They're fused. It's actually called a fused basement membrane, or a respiratory membrane is another way of saying it. So the respiratory membrane, all right, so we'll talk about the respiratory membrane. A membrane is a membrane is a membrane. It's fused epithelium, and so imagine this side over here, all right? One side would be, say, the alveoli, and the other side would be open to the capillary. So I didn't really do a good job of describing that. So let's think about it like this. So here's the capillary right here, right in here where they've circled. If you zoom in, so let's look at it even further, zoom in. First, if you need to pause the video, so there's 3 layers. You got the squamous epithelium, you have the endothelia that's touching the capillary, and then the actual fused part, which is, this is alveoli and endothelial cells that are part of the capillary. Okay, so let's see if we can, capillary endothelium, right here. So this is, notice this is the alveoli, so this is the space, this is red blood cell, and all this would be plasma. All right, that fluid-filled matrix. And then this, so you'll see the nucleus. There's an endothelial cell, and then here's part of the cytoplasm. This is actually the cytoplasm. All right, and then the fused, this right here, this fused basement, that's CT, that's connective tissue. All right, then you have the alveolar epithelium. So this is, let's see if we can zoom back over here. Oops. So here's the nuclei, and then this would be part of its flat cytoplasm. Here is the nucleus, and here's its cytoplasm, and the rest of its cell membrane, and the rest of its cell membrane or plasma membrane. You can see it better, see the cell here. And so this is going to connect. There's all these cells that are lining it that are the epithelial cells. Okay? And then endothelia you should associate here. That's the lining of this capillary. All right. So just pause that for a second if you need it. All right. I think we pretty much need to realize that really, if we go from here, there's the oxygen. This oxygen got here from originally by breathing it in through the nasal passage all the way down, trachea, bronchioles, primary bronchus or bronchi, secondary, tertiary, eventually bronchioles, terminal bronchioles, and then respiratory that has this attached to it, and that's where the gas is going to be there. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Just a reminder, again, the respiratory membrane consists of all those 3 layers. Go back to the previous slide. And really what's going on here, this is where this is happening. Again, this would be the alveoli. This is the nucleus. This would be the alveolar cell. This would be, and here you can see the nucleus. See how it kind of, its cell membrane kind of wraps around. Now, it's actually several cells connected to each other. And eventually, so this would be pulmonary. Over here would be systemic. And this is the result of cellular respiration. This is internal respiration, which is the gas exchange. Carbon dioxide is coming out, oxygen is coming in. All right, so that's pretty much it. Brought to you by Curious Moranland.